Thank you very much. Welcome to this session about QField. It's meanwhile a quite standard session that I'm giving very often, and it's always a bit hard to like cover the discrepancy between like showing some very basic concepts and the latest and greatest features that you want to show to people anyway, which are very natural to me now and very current, very actual. So basically, QField, professional fieldwork. I'll just give a super short introduction. Open source journey engines made in Switzerland. We're OpenGIS.ch. We do a broad range of services around development with a couple of QGIS core developers, including me. I've been developing QGIS myself for roughly 10 years, a bit over 10 years actually. Been quite active in there nowadays, a bit less than I used to. And yeah, that's, and I also started QField myself back in the days. I'll maybe get back to that later. QField for QGIS, I guess most of the people in here have heard about it before. It's an award-winning app. We were super proud last year to have the Best of Swiss Apps Award in the category Enterprise. So that was quite amazing. And actually we were a finalist in the category User Experience, which was quite interesting for me, because quite often when you develop apps, you have specific use cases, and that's where you bring in all the user experience and all the UX team. Whereas QField is like an all-around Swiss Army knife tool, and it's apparently still able to do some UX, and that made me proud that we were able to defend all the requests for too many buttons and keep the user interface as slim as possible. So why did we actually start with QField? Because basically data is outside the office. You might have aerial imagery and whatever in there, but sometimes you just need to go out and you need to collect data outside. What is it? So it's a mobile data collection app for QGIS, and it is actually based on QGIS. We will hear more about that later on. It has a super minimalist UI. That's what I said before, like with the few buttons, we try to really only show buttons when they're really needed. So that means like if it's possible to somehow spare away a button and not even add it, that's even better, because well, some buttons you don't just need them. And on the other hand, some buttons, like there are a lot of powerful tools inside QField as well, you will just show them when they're needed, in the context when they're needed. And yeah, that's the basic map view here that you see. There's just a few buttons that are always visible in this case. There's beautiful cartography inside, which is not actually QField's fault, but QGIS' fault. And it's great that QGIS just delivers still, and even every year a bit better cartographic possibilities. And I've seen some amazing maps being produced. We have powerful tools inside QField. So even though the interface tends to be quite small when or minimalist when you start it, you have things like cutting features, duplicating features, merging features. So there's plenty of like advanced possibilities to edit polygons, to do geometric operations on things. Yeah, there is, and like topological editing is a button, so you can try even to get already quite good topology on the field. I wouldn't completely rely on that, better do your checks afterwards in post-processing, but anyway, like you can already have a quite good data quality for topological data by using topology. There is a lot of like efficient interactions. Set feature as destination is here, for example. We'll get back to that later and skip that slide for now because there are plenty to come still. Then a lot of like beneficial integrations, like taking pictures for your features, attachments for your features. And one of the things that we've been very, very active on in the last year is professional hardware integration. Like this one, I'll also get back to that later on, like specific GNSS devices, but also other hardware, how we can deal with that. Just a short recap. It all started back in 2010, actually, when my colleague Marco Bernasocchi started with a Google Summer of Code with QGIS for Android. He, I think he spoke about this in the opening keynote, had fun compiling all the libraries that are used for QGIS for Android. And then a couple of years went by, and we had like QGIS on Android devices, but still with all that like toolbars and tiny little buttons you don't really want to use with a finger. And so basically between 2013 and 2014, we had the first commit on the QField repository, which eventually went into QField 1.0, which was released mid-2018. Then, like roughly 4 years later, we had QField 2.0, and now we are somewhere in 2023, just after the QField Cloud release. I'll just zoom in a bit on that map, because quite interesting for us is that between the release of QField 2.0 and I think 2.8 is actually missing, that should also be there, and nowadays, that was amazing, like the speed of development that happened around QField, the number of features that went into it, it just like really got a lot of traction recently, and it's, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that has been coming in recently. Supported platforms, recently, more or less recently, QField on Windows is available, which is, I think, quite handy on the one thing when you configure a project, so you can quickly test it just without like putting your project onto a mobile device. You can just directly test it on Windows. It's also available for Mac and for Linux, in case you happen to have one of these like I do. And finally, next to Android, which we support forever, it's also available on iOS. Something new is that we support tracking on point layers, so tracking of lines, so that's like walking around and just continuously tracking your position has been available for a while, but now we also do tracking on point layers, and that gives some amazing functionality, which I will be able to demonstrate later on with a video. So there is also a pretty good integration for external GNSS devices, which you can see here. Like there's, you can attach an external Bluetooth device, and then get access to all the high precision information from Bluetooth devices. And actually, it's not only Bluetooth, which we've had for quite a while already, but nowadays it's also possible to have like UDP and TCP integration, and that is quite cool, because then some manufacturers, some hardware device suppliers, they can provide like their corrected data, because with Bluetooth, maybe I need to start there, with Bluetooth there's always like the problem that you have like, you need to get corrected, RTK corrected or NTRIP corrected data already through Bluetooth. And that, like, on the hardware side, you need 2 Bluetooth channels, and that's quite hard. Only some hardware can do that. And so with, like, UDP, it's now possible that the manufacturer of a hardware creates an app that uses one single Bluetooth channel, which, like, many devices have, and then just forwards the corrected information to QField. Long story short, this just gives better integration for a lot of external antennas. And it also allowed us to do some proper unit testing, so that we can actually like be sure that we cover a range of scenarios with NMEA parsing that we were not really able to properly control before that, because in our integration test environment we don't have Bluetooth devices lying around, but UDP is quite easy to do. One more thing that might be very helpful if you're doing like a professional surveying is positioning averaging. So that's something that we've added a couple of releases ago, which is quite new. And you can basically get a couple of points and then collect like 10 or 20 points. And within these points, you create the average, which gives you a much better more precise position than you would be normally getting by just collecting one single point. Back to professional hardware in general and NMEA integration. So there is this one device, which we happen to have at our booth, maybe you've seen it before, which has an IMU integrated. So that's an inertial measurement unit, if I'm not wrong. And that means that it knows like the direction it is looking at. And with that pole of 2 meters, it actually knows if I hold it like this and it's 2 meters at the 30 degrees angle up there, it's actually measuring the point at the end of the pole, which is quite cool if you have to measure something which is like covered by a roof where you would normally not be getting a super precise position, but with that you can just go and hold it a bit steep and get the position. And it's also not like super critical that you hold it like precisely with the bubble to get a good position. There is a possibility to do navigation and stakeout. This is something that we wanted to do for a while and finally have had the possibility to do. And basically with that you can do navigation. If we talk about navigation in this case here, we don't talk about like turn-by-turn navigation as you know from Google Maps, but more like, okay, you need to go somewhere and dig a hole and you just need to go like, I don't know, 50 meters in this direction and it's exactly there. And it gives you like your orientation, your distance to the target, and allows you, for example, also if you have a polygon to go, if you have a test field for your some project, scientific project where you want to check the same area multiple times, you can go there and find out the borders of that area. And next to like the rough direction where that brings you pretty close to it, there is also this what we call the precise view, which as soon as you get within a really short range of the target, you will see a blue dot appear and a circle around it. And as you move your pole or your antenna, you can really get it really close to the center until you actually have exactly the point that you need. And that's pretty cool to get like the precise like centimeter. For example, the GNSS antenna that I showed before has like sub-centimeter precision, so you can really exactly go to where you need to be in the end and get some sound and haptic feedback if you're there for extra fun. And this is actually one of my favorite integrations, which is external sensors. Happened to be this spring. And what we are seeing here is a tracking where we track points actually. And this is somewhere, and someone is running around with something, I think in English, it's probably also called Geiger counter, like where you have you measure the radioactivity. These are people doing some cleanup of sites, possibly polluted sites by nuclear radiation. And they need to know where the radiation is highest. So they have an external device connected via serial port to QField, and in real time, all the points that they're collecting, getting like the value of that current point, which means they also get like on the field directly, they will see like where the hotspot is, on where the highest value is. And you see that like things start a bit to blink and go on and off. And this is basically because it takes into account all the other points on the field. So we are not like having a fixed threshold above which it will be yellow, but it's rather yellow or red based on like here's the highest radiation on this side. And they had another view where they had fixed values, and with the two of them, they could really get they were like saying like, okay, normally we would be doing that and then going back to the office and do a lot of post-processing, then realizing that we missed some things, and then we had to go back to the site and do it once again. And there was like an immense boost for them. And shortly after, we had some other people telling us that they connected their own serial ports devices to QField, and I'd love it. And something else. It's a beautiful example of how we always strive to also make QGIS better, because basically the implementation that we did here, we did directly in QGIS. QField uses QGIS under the hood, so we can also use it from QField. But if you have QGIS and you prefer, instead of running around with your cell phone or your tablet, you want to run around with your computer, you can do the very same thing with QGIS. working with attributes. Let me check the time. Maybe I don't do too much there. There is a QR code reader. There is a bit of an outlook. There is an NFC reader coming up shortly. There is the possibility to work with temporal properties. So you can do like temporal filters on your layer and only show some features that were created or did by time. We had some archaeological people doing that to show where and what, and this is just some example here that we made up of hiking routes. Atlas printing is something that's possible. That means that you can create in QGIS your atlases, and then right on the field, you can directly create some printouts. Either you create that as a PDF export, which you can then send by email to someone, which is something that people do. And even more, there are also mobile printers. So you can just take a mobile printer along and directly print some things. I really, I think I need to tell that example because I find it just really, really nice application. It's about cadastre and property. So in a lot of like the global south and developing countries, we have this problem that people, like they live somewhere, but they don't actually have a proof of their property, right? So there's more and more initiatives going on where you go there and then you like ask people, where do you live? You get like 10 neighbors to sign who is living where and kind of have that as a proof, because like having all the juridical background work would be way too expensive and too much work. So you just do that, and that acts for people to protect their own goods over like multinational companies that otherwise could just come and say like, hey, look, we have that paper. And yeah, so that was used for this kind of thing, like directly mapping it on site, printing it, and then having people sign their neighbors' parcels. You can do a height profile, which is some nice, we were just benefiting here from what QGIS itself did. Should be coming up soon. So basically we measure the length of something and then we say we want to do the height profile, and then you know if you really want to cycle up there or not. One of my favorites, we finally have a dark mode. Multimedia, another good example of developing in tandem with QGIS. So basically, this one here is a new development we did for not only photo integration, but also video and audio notes. So here we did a video of some Omani men doing their dance and geolocalized it, added it to a point, sent it through QField Cloud, and I'll just fast forward to QGIS, where we downloaded it again and had a look at that point, and the very same video clip, you can now look at it in QGIS. So that is available since QGIS 3.30, I think, that you can also add videos, thanks to QField. In the end, it's now possible to handle multimedia scenarios in QGIS. You can rotate your map canvas either by 2 fingers or also by your magnetometer. Some prefer to call it a compass. I need to go faster, so. And something is like, you might have heard that there is like a QField Cloud which you can use to share data, but for us it's always important that we don't lock users into our systems or services, even if we really love that people use it, but actually it's also possible to just export and import, like if you receive something by mail, by some text message, you can just open up a geo-referenced PDF, for example, that you receive from somewhere in QField, and also share it with someone. So that's possible. You can search for attributes and coordinates. There's a measurement tool, which I won't go into detail, and there is so much more for like geometry editing and drawing, GNSS and tracking, dashboard widgets like QML and HTML, which gives you like visual feedback. I think on the first slide I had some example of some bars. QField Cloud, I quickly mentioned it. I won't go into detail with that. My colleague Marco will be giving a talk about that at the same stage here at 2:30 this afternoon. If you want to join that, it's for synchronizing your data from the mobile phone or tablet with the Office. And yeah, basically it's free and open source. That's where you can get it. And there is 750K Android downloads, 65K iOS installations. We don't know how many Windows installations there are because we don't have the statistics. A lovely 4.8 star reviews with 5,700 reviews. Please help us to make that even better. We love that. And 250,000 monthly users, whatever. And the UN suggested QField as a data collection tool for their UN things. Now, finally, I know the time is up, but I need to do that pitch. I'm sorry. We are going to launch a crowdfunding for QField these days. It's about background tracking. We are able to track our position when we walk around, but there is one limitation at the moment that you need to keep your app open all the time. That drains your battery if you switch the app. So as soon as the app goes to the background, you will no longer have the possibility to continue tracking because Android will just kill it. So with that development, we have a proper background process to do that. If this is something that you'd like to see happen in QField, or if you'd like to support us in general, there's the URL, or check it out at our booth. I think it's a great enhancement to QField that we would love to do.